My name's Sam. I'm a researcher at LinkedIn. Been primarily attached to the talent solutions business for the last 4.5 years. Our talent solutions business helps recruiters find and source talent. So a lot of my time in the last 4 years has been spent on job-seeking behavior, talent trends, recruiting trends, and kind of like the global economy in general. And I also realize, like Rob Humphrey, who spoke with you earlier, I was someone who underperformed in college as well because I had a good time. So I also realize I'm standing between you and the cocktail hour, so I'm going to try to be as brief and quick as possible. So you've probably seen this before, or at least heard it. At LinkedIn, our mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. When we think about this in a talent solutions perspective, when it comes to recruiting, we think about this and we operationalize it by connecting talent with opportunity at massive scale. It's kind of like what we do with Recruiter and job slots and all the products that we sell to our corporate enterprise partners. This is not a small task with our 380 plus million members. So today we're going to talk about a couple things related to recruiting, the global economy, and preparing students for successful careers after they graduate. I've been listening most of the day. Actually, a lot of this lines up with a lot of stuff that you've already heard before. So hopefully repetition, it'll sink in a little bit. And it was actually nice to hear folks on right before me talk about some of the stuff, the skills-based learning, which we'll go into in the end. Let's see. So our friends at the World Bank seem to think that we're due for some economic growth in the next couple of years. And this is going to be largely driven by developed economies globally as they start to pick up steam. So, as I mentioned, I've done a lot of tracking of the economy, global economy, all of that stuff at LinkedIn. The question is, do we think that's going to happen? So over the last few years, we've seen an uptick in the increases of full-time hiring volumes and hiring budgets. The question that we have there is, will this continue? Do we agree with the World Bank that, and do our people who take our surveys, who are global recruiting leaders, think that this trend is going to continue? Well, sort of. While the up and to the right trend doesn't necessarily continue in the way that we've seen in the last few years, it does actually flatten out, and so we see that recruiting and talent acquisition leaders are thinking that they will have continued increases in hiring, which is probably good for people who are about to graduate, whether undergraduate or graduate school. What's most interesting about this is, I don't know if it's super apparent by this chart, is that the gap between volume and budgets is actually growing over time. So this kind of leads us to this thought that organizations are going to have to do more with less. So they're going to have to start really focusing on scalable recruiting solutions where you can connect talent with opportunity at scale. So now we're going to dip into this idea of recruiting students and recent grads. At LinkedIn, we look at these kind of groups together because they're very similar in kind of like their actions and behaviors on LinkedIn. And we know upon graduation, students face a lot of choices about their career. From some of our data, we learn that they may have a little less to worry about. This has actually been pretty consistent over the last 4 years, where 2/3 of talent acquisition leaders say that they're actually using dedicated student recruiting programs as a source of hire. And this is significant sources of hire for many of these corporations globally. So this isn't just a domestic stat, this is kind of big picture stuff. It's a technical term. And kind of to double down on that a little bit, we see that when we dive into some of these categories around student recruiting specifically, early career hiring, which is, we think of it as like less than 5 years of experience, and positioning your company as an attractive place for those under 30, we see that organizations and recruiters and talent acquisition leaders really over-index on kind of like caring about that. Where the disconnect occurs is kind of over on the right. They may not actually know what's going on in those categories. They want to be seen as attractive, but they're not necessarily doing the work to understand what is attractive. So what I hope to be able to do in the next few slides is arm you with some interesting insights, data, facts, figures, to help you in these conversations with some of your corporate partners as we're working to help students and recent grads find gainful employment. By and large, students and recent grads think about two things when they think about their first job or their next job, right? And what's going to entice them. And it's making a ton of money and having good work-life balance so they can enjoy their money that they're making. Or maybe they're concerned about living in their parents' basement. I don't know. But something interesting happens when we look at why they switch off of their first job or switch jobs early in their career. We see that actually they're not switching for more money or more work-life balance. They've actually kind of grown up a little bit in their thinking. They're thinking about lack of opportunities for advancement. Maybe they chose the wrong company or something, or the wrong career, or they want more challenging work. Maybe they've hit a ceiling in their current opportunity. And they see this we see this at a larger rate with more students and recent grads in kind of that millennial category, as opposed to some of their older, more experienced colleagues. So obviously, they've evolved in their thinking. Now, what's interesting, so we asked them, how do they find their current job, the one that they've switched to? Not surprisingly, these are the places you would think. A lot of them are scalable. A lot of them, we do as LinkedIn. The interesting thing I find here is that referrals, which is probably one of the single most scalable solutions any employer has, is tapping into their employee base to find high quality talent. We know that they're higher quality talent through referrals. Jumping the gun there. They're definitely kind of paying attention to this idea of networking and professional networking. So they were kind of listening to career services, and it's starting to sink in. So now let's transition into preparing the future workforce. And we heard a little bit about that earlier. I shouldn't walk too far away. So what we see is that there's some skepticism about global business executives. I think this is based on 15,000 surveys of global business executives in 16 or 17 countries. That there's some skepticism around this idea that educational systems around the globe are preparing today's students for successful careers. And we heard a little bit about that earlier. So the big question is, why could we be seeing this? What's going on? We're going to take a look at some in-mail data. So we've collected a lot of data on LinkedIn recruiting in-mails. So in-mails sent by recruiters to students and recent grads. And these are the top 10 kind of pairings, word clusters that we see around skills that are in demand. So this is a proxy for skills that recruiters want to hire. So we see some, odd skills like architectural design that probably don't necessarily fit some of that mold, what we see, but we take a look, we have this idea of soft skills, which are 4 of the top 7 requested skills in our in-mail. So prior speakers talked about communication skills, critical thinking, people skills. Like these are the skills that employers want and that maybe we should think about kind of like pulling into our education system in a much stronger way. So I know we have a lot of business school folks here. So as somebody who sort of went to business school, I pulled out kind of like 2 of the top industries that a business school person might work in: financial services, professional services. And we looked at some of the fastest growing skills added by students and recent grads who work in this industry. And the pattern here is actually comes out pretty clear. Industries that are not historically technology driven have that's a lot of tech skills. And Saeed and Ira and all the guys that helped me put together this deck were on my case about this. But I think this points to the fact that technology, even in traditionally non-technical industries, is actually becoming a really big deal. And making sure that we're arming students with these technical skills to be able to be successful in, say, these industries when they go to business school or wherever they end up, if they want to work there, these are some of the skills they should be looking to be adding while they're being educated at colleges and universities around the globe. So just kind of want to wrap up real quickly. Some key takeaways. I'm like way ahead of time, so you guys are going to get to the bar early. So I'm happy about that. I don't know if you are. Position your programs as an opportunity, in a way that you can take advantage of this near to midterm increased hiring and economic growth in some of these global markets, developed global markets. We also want to communicate the power of professional networks for success after graduation. We've seen, that they're engaging in referrals, they're engaging in kind of these activities on LinkedIn in which they can take advantage of their networks to get gainful employment or find opportunities or meet people in industry so they can get that first job or get a better job and pay off their student loans faster and their credit cards and not live in their parents' garage. And then highlight how your programs work to address some of the skills gaps that might help your students, your recent graduates, your prospective students to become more successful and productive in the global economy. So that's basically what I got. I've always wanted to say bars open. I'm not paying for it, but LinkedIn is. And I'm going to turn it back over to whoever's next, which I think is Jessica. And she'll wrap up. So thank you for your time and your patience.